Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Mason City Council meeting for Monday, February 16th, 2015. Could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Present.
Councilmember Bruno. Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Drosha.
Here.
Councilmember Ferris.
Here.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
Here.
Mayor Waltz.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. With everybody present, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the many blessings you bestow upon us and our community, freedoms that we enjoy, freedoms that allow us to celebrate President's Day, freedom to have meetings to further the goals and objectives of our community. We ask you to watch over tonight as we practice glory for our community. Keep everybody safe and well.
Next item on the agenda is announcements. Are there any announcements this evening?
Oh, yes.
Councilmember Ferris.
Well, you have in front of you the Parks and Trails map, and there is a task force. I did go to the first meeting of the Ingham County Parks Board. There is a task force coming up meeting on February 19th and March 5th at 5:30 at the Human Service Building, 5303 South Cedar Street. That's Building 3. And commissioners are inviting county residents to submit ideas, particularly. The next meeting of the Park Board is on Monday, the 23rd of February at 6 p.m. at the same office building. And if you are interested in a little more local, we have the, what do we call this, Disaster Preparedness Group. That is an ad hoc group that has met once. And Dennis Howe and Dwayne Bagley at the Methodist Church are heading up this force, and it's at 7 p.m. at the Firehouse Training Room, and anyone is welcome to attend. They're also soliciting ideas. This is for large things like tornado, the recent disaster on the highway at Dexter, our electrical outlets, big things, but we're, as a local group, sharing what resources are available. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris. Any other announcements?
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to remind the community that our city's birthday is coming up, March 9th, 2015. We will be holding a special ceremony here at City Hall to mark Mason's sesquicentennial 150th anniversary. And the ceremony will be held at 6 o'clock p.m. right here in City Hall in the council chambers and community room. So we hope that everyone comes out. It should be a wonderful program. We've got a lot of special things planned, and it will kick off what will hopefully be a year-long celebration for the Mason community. Thank you.
Councilmember Ferris.
One more, sorry. The blood drive is this Thursday at St. James Church from 11:30 to 5:15. Thank you. And because of the extreme cold, people have been reluctant to get out. They are asking people to make a little extra effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Next item is people. The next item, which is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Drosha.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented. Approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, presentation. I will turn this portion over initially to Mr. Colburn.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. This evening, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of gentlemen. I know that you know them. However, first of all, we've made the introductions, of course, to Mr. Kenneth Baker, who is the DPW Director, and tonight wanted to introduce you to Mr. Tom Silsby. And Tom, if I can ask you to come up to the podium. Tom has been with the city for 10 years, has been a lifetime resident of the community, had been educated here locally, and is part of our team and is stepping up into the management position of the Superintendent of Streets and Water. This includes that it's required to have a water treatment D2 and a water distribution S2 license, which I will tell you, it takes some real study to get there to learn this. So that's the minimum. Actually, I believe you have a 1, don't you, Tom?
Yes, I have 2-1.
So he is not only qualified, but in a real sense becomes the owner of the water treatment plant in the sense of how the state looks at this. So I wanted to introduce you to Mr. Tom Silsby.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. As he said, my name is Tom Silsby. I look forward to serving the City of Mason in the endeavor as Superintendent of Public Works. Thank you for having the confidence in installing me in this position.
Well, thank you, Tom. I'm not going to say how long I've known you. Let's just say a very long time. So, council members, why don't you join me and let's congratulate Mr. Silsby.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Glad to see you pulling inside. All right. Thank you. Looking forward to you.
You only have to do this once, Tom. But you look real nice in a tie. We don't try to wear that damn thing on job.
No.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we should mention that building almost as long as mine.
Honorable Mayor, if I may, the next process is then to fill his position with water treatment plant operator. If we go in-house on that, then we would be filling from that position as well. So you can see the domino effect. But we're building our team and very excited to have him on board.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. It is encouraging to see the team come together as changes happen, and always, of course, happy to see filling from within when possible, especially when the qualifications are there as they are this time. So, again, congratulations. Item 8 on the agenda, regular business, is a report on the Riverwalk Pedestrian Bridge and Trailhead Sign Project. As you recall, at the last meeting, this came up. Some questions were asked about the progress, and I requested that we have a little update on that tonight. So, Mr. Colburn, the floor is yours.
Honorable Mayor and council members, as you know, we've been blessed to have the Hayhoe family that's very much assisted us with the Hayhoe Riverwalk Trail. And we've had 2 major phases, and we've worked now on finding appropriate trailheads. And at this point, we're doing specific improvements to the trailhead. We have with us here Mr. David Haywood, who's the Zoning and Development Director, who's been specifically working on this project, and he's going to go over it in a little more detail with you.
Good evening, Mr. Haywood.
Good evening. David Haywood, Zoning and Development Director. Just wanted to give you a quick update on the progress for the replacement of the Riverwalk pedestrian bridge right there at the cemetery offices that spans the Sycamore Creek. At this point, we have a project agreement with the state, with the Department of Natural Resources, and part of that requirement is that we have the bridge specifications developed and then have those reviewed by the state before we can proceed with bidding or any construction. So Wolverine Engineers and Surveyors has done that. They've put together the bid specification package with all the details regarding the bridge and all of the required barrier-free access requirements and so on. Those have been put together. They've been sent to the state for review, and we do have verbal verbal nod from the state that they passed review, and just we're waiting for the paperwork to follow that. But so far, we've got a verbal approval from them. Of course, we won't move forward until we have that written authorization in hand. This does include, of course, the bridge is funded by many sources, including the Department of Natural Resources, I mentioned, George and Lisa Hayhoe, the City of Mason, Iva Bond Fund, Tri-County Bicycle Association, the DART Foundation, Councilmember Mulvaney, and Councilmember Ferris. So we're grateful to have all those funding sources in place. And we look forward to getting this documentation that gives us the nod to start with our bidding procedure so we can get started on it this summer.
Are there any questions for Mr. Haywood? Councilmember Mulvaney.
When we started on the project, I thought we had $40,000 committed from the DNR, and now I notice it's 30. Did that change, or
No,
was I misinformed?
Maximum amount from the state was $30,000.
Okay. Dave, when this goes to bid, can it go to can the bids go to local companies, and or is this bridge by design can only be filled by what I want to describe as a catalog company that made our other one? Or can we go to H&H, for example, and ask them to build the project on site, or build it and deliver it on site? What's our mandate from the state?
Well, the state doesn't mandate one way or the other how the bridge is constructed, just that it's constructed to a standard, engineering standard, like, for example, AASHTO. So our engineering specs are AASHTO, I believe, and we've decided to go the route of a pre-manufactured bridge as opposed to designing and building the bridge ourselves to save on engineering costs. To have Wolverine engineers design the bridge would escalate our engineering costs significantly, and then you have assembly costs in the field as well, so that would add to the bottom line on this bridge for sure. But of course it kind of depends on how it's designed. But we went the route of the pre-manufactured bridge as a recommended. It can be installed by any qualified construction company that has experience doing that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, so this type of bridge would be, am I correct? Would be pre-designed, so it would be built at a particular location and then transported to Mason, and then placed on top of the footings by a crane of some kind to do the job.
That's correct.
And under those circumstances, would that company that manufactures that bridge take responsibility for liability of that bridge as having engineered and manufactured it?
My understanding would be that the company that built the bridge would have the liability for manufacturing of the bridge itself, and that the installation, the company that installed it, would hold the liability for the actual installation.
Dave, in the original specifications, or let me say the original estimates of cost, there was like about either $12,000 or $15,000 in the estimated cost for engineering cost. If the bridge is manufactured by another company and they take the liability of the manufacturer of it, the placement of it on site, would we have to pay engineering cost on that portion of the contract through our own local engineer?
The original project scope included a pre-manufactured bridge and then an installation on abutments that are created. That included that same cost for engineering as part of that whole package, because the engineer has to design the abutments and match that to the pre-manufactured bridge so that when it's placed, the abutments will hold and secure that bridge that's created. So they had to set the standard for the bridge, and so that it matches to the footings.
Dave, can you explain to me? And I'm not trying to focus on any kind of heavy questions for you, but can you explain to me how engineering costs on a project such as this are built into the bid by our Wolverine engineer contracts? Do they not just get a percentage of the gross amount of the cost? And if so, aren't we getting double charged for engineering fees on the bridge structure itself?
Well, there's only one engineering fee, and that's from Wolverine Engineers. And what they do with that fee is they set the standard for the bridge, they design the abutments, they handle all the permitting processes, they handle all the soil erosion and sedimentation, the site restoration, they do the inspections during the construction, they take detailed notes and make sure that the project is happening on time. They create the bid specs for us. They handle the bid meetings. They might make a recommendation on a contractor, provide a contractor list. They did the pre-design. They did the estimation. So there's a wide range of ways that they're involved throughout the process that covers that particular fee. How exactly that's generated, I don't know, but it's typically a percentage of the overall cost for that type of project.
I have been...
If I can interrupt you, I apologize. But Mr. Colburn may have much more experience in this avenue on how those fees are generated, if he has any ideas beyond that I've not mentioned.
Go ahead, Mr. Colburn.
To answer your question, Councilmember Mulvaney, no and no. And to go back to the two questions, it's not double dipping because the fee for the bridge itself, all those costs are built into, even their own design work is built into the cost of the bridge. So it's not double dipping because what we're being charged for is not unlike what Mr. Haywood just referenced, is all the other services that Wolverine would be providing. And it's not a set amount. We know through experience, in generalities, percentage-wise, what costs are for projects. And there's a little bit more for federal projects than there are for, say, more localized projects. So what we do is we estimate. And when you're filling out the state forms, which Mr. Haywood worked on, we have to provide estimates. What you saw is an estimate. It's not down to the dollar. It's not contracted down to the dollar. There are sometimes in projects when things happen that we may end up having to do a little more work on, say change orders is a good example. Or it may be that we were able to find ways or things, different steps that we didn't have to do, so we don't get charged for those. They pretty much charge for the time and service that they're doing out into the field. So when they're designing a project like this, they don't design in the sense of the structural component of the bridge itself. Now, they are designing, working with the company in terms of the width and length of a bridge, the span that it has to cross, how much concrete they have to put in as the footings and the deadmans and all that stuff. And they link that to the project and all the other tasks, including the contract administration, things of that nature. So those are built on estimates. And what you saw on that form, and you saw it right. I mean, that's exactly what we put down. That doesn't mean it's going to come out exactly to that penny. Matter of fact, it usually doesn't. It just depends on what the type of project is. Now, working with a contractor who's doing a hard project, for instance, a street, we get out into the field and all of a sudden we realize well, we have to take out a little bit more concrete, or we have to put, maybe a little more curb and gutter in, or reset a manhole, this or that. We find that there has to be a little bit of leeway, give and take in those types of projects. So working with an engineer, they're charging for their actual time out into the field. On the other side of it, unless we're actually making change orders for significant amounts of concrete or asphalt, the contractor has to stick to that price because he bid it out for what it is. But what the engineer is doing is they're keeping track of how many yards of concrete are poured, how many tons of asphalt are poured. They're doing the testing to make sure that it's got the right compaction, services of that nature. And so they're double checking to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for in terms of the concrete or the asphalt in the street or the bridge in this particular case. So that amount that you saw in the form that was filled out is not a hard contractual number with Wolverine.
Mr. Colburn and Mr. Hayward, so if I understand correctly, what you're both saying is that for the engineering fee, we're not only getting the engineering services from Wolverine Engineering, but they're acting essentially like a general contractor, if you will, from start to finish, providing us a turnkey project that once we give them the go-ahead, they take it from A to Z and deliver us a completed project for that fee, and we don't have to do anything further from that point.
There are project managers, and then what we do is we communicate with them. So does the DPW in terms of discussions, particularly when there's decisions to be made. If there's something that's out in the field and you have to tweak the project a little bit. Mm-hmm. So there are project managers out in the field on the day-to-day basis. You actually have an inspector out there, double checking the loads from the trucks and keeping tabs of how many tons have been brought in, things of that nature.
Okay. Councilmember Mulvaney.
Dave, it's of interest to me to know what we're up against in terms of, I'm sure that there is a lot of time and travel and expense of the Parks Department communicating with DPW on the other side of a 12-foot creek, because you can't drive across the creek. It has to go clear out onto State Street and back up to Jefferson and then out to the plant. Under the terms that we accepted with the DNR, is there any way that that bridge can be allowed to be used for city vehicles, maybe city vehicles only, but at least not blocked off from city vehicles, so that we have a $90,000 bridge, but we can't drive across it with anything more than a lawnmower? That part of it kind of bothers me.
That I can't answer explicitly. I mean, that's more of a programming issue with the Public Works Department and including the Parks crew. I will tell you that this bridge is designed very similar to, or the specifications for this bridge are very similar to the bridge at the north end of the cemetery, which has a removable bollard, and you can get a vehicle across that if you need to.
Did you say you can get a vehicle across?
You can. You should be able.
But they block. Well, why then do they block it off?
It's not really intended for vehicular use on a regular basis, only as needed. So, I guess to answer your question, it will not be used regularly by city vehicles. It's intended to be a pedestrian bridge.
But it could have, seems like, some tremendous savings for us if city vehicles can traverse across there.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question and a comment following up with Councilmember Mulvaney's question about vehicular traffic. I understand this is a pedestrian bridge, but in line with the current parameters of the Riverwalk Trail, will this bridge be able to accommodate non-motorized vehicles as well?
Non-motorized vehicles in the sense of?
Bicycles and
yes,
things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Okay, so will someone...
Bicycles, wheelchairs, even motorized vehicles for assistance for barrier-free access. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it will accommodate a city vehicle like a pickup, but on a limited use basis. Yeah, it's not designed for regular vehicular traffic.
Sure. I just know that our trail is both for pedestrian and non-motorized vehicles, so I wanted to make sure the bridge was also available for that use. The second comment that I had was just directed to city staff in general, both yourself and Mr. Colburn. I appreciate the listing of donors that we have included in our packet this evening, and I know part of the project was to establish a trailhead sign with the bridge. I wanted to maybe suggest and ask if it were to be possible to somehow give recognition to the donors as part of whatever sign is placed at that bridge. We've had some very generous people here, and so I think that it may be appropriate to include, maybe a secondary sign or some sort of plaque, not necessarily expensive, but just saying, this bridge was made possible by the following individuals. And so I simply put that forward as a suggestion, noting that we're truly thankful to some of our colleagues on this council and then also various organizations in our community and statewide. Thank you.
Yeah, we actually are planning on incorporating that into the signage.
Great.
The DNR actually requires that as part of their signage, that their contribution be listed. And out of fairness to all of the other donors, I think they should be included right with that list. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
When are you going to build it, Dave?
Good question. I was just going to make sure I stated that before I left. We are anticipating going out to bid around approximately April 1st, and hopefully receiving bids and selecting a contractor for construction as early as June 15th, June of 2015. So we want to do it this summer. We want to do it fairly quickly as our funding sources are available. So we want to use that up and get it under construction now. That timeline is subject to weather, availability of contractors, and that kind of thing. So we really are kind of at the mercy of all those elements in play. So we'll keep posted as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Haywood.
Thank you.
It's nice to see this come together. It's been a project that was shaky at first. It was off and then on. And that project that was approved was for a pedestrian bridge. So I appreciate the commentary on it, but if we dissect this and put it back together in the form of anything other than what it presently is, we'll only add to the delay considerably that we've already had, which is why we brought this up as a question at the last council meeting to inquire about its progress. Good observation on Mayor Pro Tem Brown's part as well about the donors, and especially I was pleased to see that the DART Foundation had reinstated their $10,000 grant, because initially they had withdrew that because of the early confusion of whether we were moving forward with this or not. So I'd like to thank the DART Foundation for doing that for us. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. Councilmember Ferris.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
I have none.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
None.
Councilmember Drosha.
None.
New business, Councilmember Ferris.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
I have none.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
None.
Councilmember Drosha.
Yes, just one item. Councilmember Clark could not be here this evening because he had surgery on an eye, and I would like to move to excuse his absence for this evening because I don't think we should hold that against him.
I supported that.
All those in favor of excusing Councilmember Clark signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Correspondence, you have in your packet the monthly revenue and expenditure report. And next item on the agenda is liaison reports. out of neglect for the Planning Commission, the last two meetings, let's start with with Mayor Pro Tem Brown and the Planning Commission. I know they met.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning Commission met last Tuesday on I'm losing my dates real quick here. On the 10th, thank you. It met last week on the 10th. It was a joint meeting with the City Council regarding the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act and subsequently the ordinance that is currently on the books here in Mason and subject to a temporary moratorium. In fact, all council members were present, and all of you know that there was a very positive discussion by all of those in attendance. I also want to thank our police chief for being there and giving us his insight from the law enforcement side of things. If members of the community want to see what the discussion entailed, you can view that on the city's website by clicking on videos and looking at the last Planning Commission meeting video. The outcome of this particular discussion was simply to provide the subcommittee of the Planning Commission with enough of a context to move forward with their deliberations. They are going to recommend an approach to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will subsequently make a recommendation to the City Council. And at this point, it sounds like the options are to either extend the moratorium for an additional period, pending some of the current legislation that is being considered at the state legislature, or to look at how we might devise our own ordinance consistent with current judicial precedent and current legal precedent, which may be a tough task to do considering that both of those are moving targets. And the final option would be to simply do nothing. And there are both promises and pitfalls with all of those different suggestions. So I want to thank our Planning Commission subcommittee for the work that they're going to do in continuing to research this and follow this. Mr. David Haywood will be key in leading that subcommittee and ultimately what their determination will be. That being said, the next Planning Commission meeting will be on Tuesday, March 10th at 6:30 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. And that is the extent of my report on the Planning Commission.
Can I react on the issue?
Sure. First, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown, for your report. And Councilmember Mulvaney, I believe, has a question for you.
Well, I haven't had anybody to talk to for quite a while, so I just got a lot to say, I guess.
Notice that.
Yeah, okay. So, anyway, sitting in on the Planning Commission meeting, I think that without collaborating with the surrounding townships, that anything we would do is in vain. I mean, we can have the best ordinance in the world, but they can develop the thing on North Cedar Street. And so, unless we're going to play ball along with the surrounding townships, particularly Vevay, I think they got to consider we would accomplish practically nothing. They'll just move outside the city a block, and they can develop there. And so, if we're looking at the downside of the potential development around the issue of legalized marijuana, I think we got to collaborate with those other township agencies early in the game. Maybe they would share in the cost of ordinances that fit both the township and the city.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up on Councilmember Mulvaney's comments, I'll say two things. One, in my role as liaison to the Planning Commission, I will certainly take that suggestion and that concern to the Planning Commission, but I'll also share with the Council that as part of the deliberations at the Planning Commission level, I know that there is the intent to include public comment and also to reach out to our neighbors as well, because this is an issue that affects not only our community but our surrounding neighbors, and it's something that we need to include the public on in terms of hearing concerns about where these types of operations could be located and how they can, if they can, fit within the nature and the culture of our community. And so I know that Mr. Haywood is committed to some public outreach and not only having a public hearing on this, but I'm sure that we'll also make sure that our neighbors are included, just as they have in other planning processes, whether it was the master plan or any of our other collaborative efforts. But I will be sure to keep that in front of the Planning Commission as they go through this process.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown. It would be advantageous to know what our neighbors are doing, but I still feel that that we're moving in the right direction from our workshop, that it is incumbent upon the Planning Commission to recommend to the council what they think the best solution for the city within the city limits is, and we'll go from there. As always, this has been a moving target, and it will remain to be so. Tree Commission, Councilmember Ferris.
Tree Commission meets in April, as my usual commercial. There are still some trees available for the sesquicentennial plantings, heritage tree program. There are 2 planting times, generally April and September. So if you haven't got it together by spring, there is a fall planting time. They make wonderful birthday presents, etc. And for $150, you can plant a $300 tree because the city is matching funds. So it's a great bargain. We have some to go. We're hoping to replace 150 trees out of the ones that have been slowly diminishing and due to some couple of big windstorms and that wonderful holiday tree downer that we had the last few years back. So, just a little money and keep our city green for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris.
A question for
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief question to Councilmember Ferris. How are we progressing with the Arbor Day nominee selection? Are you still accepting nominations?
We certainly are. Thank you for reminding me. You may give it to the city clerk. Arbor Day selection is not necessarily someone who has to do with trees in the city, but we try to recognize someone with an agricultural or horticultural bent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Traffic Commission, Councilmember Drosha.
Yes, I'll attempt to give the report that I didn't have with me last time and froze on. But I'll be brief. We met January 28th. Before the meeting, Commissioner Josh Woodland was sworn in. We then proceeded to elect Roger Bauer as chairperson, and in his absence, we elected Jeff Howder as vice chairperson. We didn't have any regular business, but under new business, we had a brief discussion about eastbound Ash Street at Cedar Street, there next to the Cedar Street School. I've noticed that there's some confusion about whether it is 1 lane or 2 lanes, and I believe that'll be discussed again, but we need to find out if the state MDOT has control over that intersection or whether we do. I believe, it is my personal belief, that there ought to be 2 lanes, one turning left, the other going straight and turning right, just to avoid, but it should be marked that way. There's no line dividing the 2 lanes at this point. Okay, so we had that discussion, and our next meeting will be April 22nd at 5:30 right here.
Thank you, Councilmember Drosha. Councilmember Mulvaney, Historic District Commission.
I wish I could think of something to say, but when I lost, we didn't meet, so I just have no report.
Thank you. The DDA has not met since we last met. The next meeting will be the first week of March. Council member reports. Any council member have a report?
Yes.
Council member Ferris.
I just wanted to note the civics program at the high school uses area residents and people to judge the civics orals, and the high school teachers set this up. I had the privilege of serving with Representative Cochran and Senator Hertel for one session, and it was very interesting. These are our young people, and they're doing a really good job of educating themselves and their judges sometimes on issues, and they're showing a remarkable grasp of logic, and they did a wonderful job. I'm proud of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, I was just about to talk about you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Hopefully you're going to say something nice. At the last meeting, the mayor asked that I would utilize this opportunity to briefly report on the activities of the Mason Sesquicentennial Planning Committee. I mentioned briefly earlier that our ceremony will be on March 9th here at City Hall at 6:30. We did meet on February 9th of this year. I have to get my dates straight. We did meet on February 9th, and we had quite an attendance of individuals from the community, and it's nice to see that now that the sesquicentennial year is here, people are starting to come out and share new ideas and things of that nature. So the Historical Society is planning a lot of interesting activities and events this year. They are launching a book that will come out in March as a companion to the book that the Sesquicentennial Committee is publishing. And just to let you know about that, we will have copies available. Rebecca Clinton has been very pivotal in constructing a historical narrative about the community. Local businesses have contributed toward advertisements, and we also have some historical photographs that will be in this souvenir journal. It will be $15. There will be copies here available at the March 9th ceremony. And the Chamber has instituted a project as well as part of their ongoing efforts. They have a lithograph of the community that is sort of like a map of town, and it shows artistic renditions of various businesses that are a part of the community, and so many of those businesses paid for inclusion on this lithograph, and that will be available for $15 as well. It's a very nice print. You can frame it. There are some famous Mason residents that are drawn on that, as well as some famous Mason landmarks, including our courthouse and our city hall and things of that nature. So lots of exciting things happening this year. Like I said earlier, this March 9th event will be the kickoff to several other activities that will occur throughout the year. But it's a great year to be in Mason, and so we hope that everyone participates in the Sesquicentennial this year.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown. One report I have is the Mason Area Chamber of Commerce Annual Awards Dinner was earlier in the week, and Administrator Colburn and City Clerk Debbie C. and Councilmember Ferris, Mayor Pro Tem Brown, and myself did attend. And it was a fine evening as always, and we had the pleasure of helping commemorate the citizens of the 2015 Citizen of the Year, Jamie and Scott Robinson. That takes us to 14 on the agenda, Administrator's Report. Mr. Colburn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My first part of the report is in regard to the LEAP funding programs. LEAP is the Lansing Economic Development Area Programming, and basically working with them, they've come up with 3 economic resources for small businesses. These are revolving loan funds, and they're kind of spelled out in terms of what they're calling the Fund for the Lansing Equity, the Fund for Crowdfunding, and microloans. And they're targeting what they call the new economy-specific companies. You know, IT-oriented are some of them. In terms of engineering, arts, agriculture, science, fashion, and apparel. If you recall, and I mentioned fashion and apparel, they have now, throughout the Lansing area, about 10 different incubators. And that happens to just be one of them. They're working with a company out of Romania, and I believe another one in Europe, as well as trying to get and work with people here in our regional area and at MSU. So they're continuing to try to get small businesses to spin off in regard to these programs. In essence, the revolving fund is, they currently have $120,000 in that fund. They're trying to get more donations from some of the larger players, companies that are tied with LEAP, and in turn people from those companies can sit on the board and evaluate who would get those loans and such. So they're continuing to grow. They're continuing to do more outreach into the community. I'm working with them on approximately a weekly basis in terms of their searches for different companies that come into the region and are looking around. Now, oftentimes we're not the only region in the state, much less the only state that they're looking at. But we're interacting with LEAP on at least a weekly basis, and I'm thrilled to see that. The maximum of these grants are $25,000, a minimum of $10,000, and there's different terms and conditions for each grant depending on the type of business that it is. But it's another outreach for small business within the regional area that I'm pleased to see LEAP get involved with. Wanted to make you aware that the city is accepting, we've received a $1,000 grant from MSU Federal Credit Union, and we're working with them in terms of the placement. They actually want to get so involved that they participate with some of their staff as well, so we'll take the volunteer help as we can get it. That's nice to have. So we're already coordinating the details with them, and we're looking at doing that in the April-May timeframe. And then also wanted to make a recommendation. I know we talked about the council goals and objectives, and knew that there was a desire to continue to discuss those as well as work on that and as we focus more and more towards the budget as well. I had made a recommendation in terms of time for March 2nd prior to the next council meeting as a work session, if that would work for City Council. And if you would, please check your schedules on that and see if that's something you want to commit to this evening or set another time. I know time is short. That's why I put it out there.
You're set. Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Councilmember Mulvaney. Councilmember Grosha.
I believe I can work that out, although that is opening day. So,
Opening day.
so
Hmm.
but I think I can make it
Could that have any impact on us when you come in from? Well, never mind.
out. Well, I see what you're saying. But I should be able to work that out.
Just a few other. I'm
Sorry.
I did. I'm available too. That should work. That should be no problem.
Tentatively, that seems to work for most people. They come in a little early. 6:30? Yes, sir. I'll make it.
Just a few other things. We're working on the streets. We've got some of that starting to come in terms of the bids. The annual reports you'll be seeing in the near future. We're working on the fire contracts. Probably see those coming in the March, April timeframe. And Ali, we met with consumers today. If you recall, we have the sanitary line and stormwater line that had collapsed in the alley between Barnes and Jefferson behind the 100 block of Ash Street. And we met with consumers because there was a request from the DDA in terms of trying to get an estimated cost of burying those electrical lines as well. So that meeting went well with the two gentlemen here, Mr. Baker and Mr. Silsby and I, that met briefly with them, and they're going to hopefully try to get us a number by that date. They didn't guarantee it, but we're still pressing them to try to get that information for us as soon as possible. So a lot of things happening, but we're very excited about the 150th as well, as that's the first stage of that is happening very quickly as we speak to the sesquicentennial, and hope that all groups take that up as their theme this year. I know that we're talking about the Mason Rotary sesquicentennial duck race this year. And want to make sure that all the other groups and organizations take that opportunity to continue on throughout the year for the sesquicentennial celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Are there any questions for Mr. Colburn on any of his topics? Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Since the city administrator mentioned the duck race, I just want to say to any individual organization, if there's an event that you traditionally hold or would like to hold and want to have it under the banner of the sesquicentennial, you are free to do so. The planning committee is really just a facilitating body, but we're encouraging. I always use the example, if your church has an annual bake sale, why not call it the Mason 150 bake sale, just so that we can tie in a year's worth of activities an event. So the duck race is a great example, and we hope that maybe we'll get the fire department to have the sesquicentennial Great Balls of Fire event as well.
And of course, I'm sure if there's a way to work 150 something into that, like 150 ducks or something, it's to the advantage as well. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Anything else? We are adjourned.
They kept hammering that at that event. They did.
Say that.
3 times
Do you have a such setting or
Thanks for the second chance.